Hey, welcome back to the State of Love and Trust. It's episode 310, and this week we celebrate America at 250 by going back 50 years to 1976 and picking out the albums that made the soundtrack to our year. Now, you might be saying, I don't think you were alive in 1976. And to that, I'd say...
Hey, I'm Mike McCready from Pearl Jam.
Hey kids, this is Mark Arm from Mudhoney.
I'm Kevin Martin from Cannabis.
I'm Tim Thile from Soundgarden.
I am William Duvall of Alice in Chains.
Hey, I'm James Joseph from Jays and the Cold Gun.
Hi, I'm Dave Cruzen.
I am Alan Johannes.
Hey, I'm Greg Deal with Dead Pioneers.
And this is the State of Love and Trust.
The State of Love and Trust.
The State of Love and Trust.
Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Feed the algorithm.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the State of Love and Trust podcast. I'm one of your two hosts, Jason Kerepesi, and alongside me, as always, is...
Paul Ghiglieri.
Paul, we're back from a brief hiatus.
We are back in the saddle again, my friend.
Oh, he's alluding. I love it. He's alluding already. This is exciting, guys. We haven't done this show, which, if you've already read the title, I assume that you have. It's something that we started this year called Soundtracking the Year, and it's not a name the best albums of the year, although there's probably a lot of overlap. It's What are the albums that came out that are your albums of the year? Which ones spoke to you? Now, the beauty, Paul, is that the first time that we did this, we did 2016. So we were alive. We were adults. They spoke to us in a certain way. But now we're going back in time, if I can quote Huey Lewis in the News. And
this is a big year, man. This is a big year because I would say that one of the biggest influences in my life, musically speaking, is my father. There's so much of the music that I listen to today that was heavily influenced by the music that not only did he grow up listening to, but he continued to listen to throughout the 70s and 80s. And this year's like signature for him on a lot of levels. And so when we said, hey, let's do 1976, I resisted the temptation to call him and be like, hey, give me your top 10. You know what I mean? Because I really wanted to do that. Instead, I just kind of went through the records that I remember hearing when I was a kid, while he would kind of, do his throwback thing, where he'd be listening to music that he was into in high school and whatnot. He graduated in 76, if you can believe it. He had me young. But, 1976 was, like I said, just a big year for him. And so when I consider the albums that were like Hallmark records when I graduated high school compared to the records that came out in 1976, there's no comparison. Like,
it's crazy to think about. We are here. We just passed. By the way, I hope everyone's July 4th weekend was fabulous. How about 3 shakes and hip hip hoorays for America turning 250 and still being intact?
It's
barely, Paul, but we're there. We're holding on.
By the pen of power, may we continue. I don't know.
Exactly. No, but going back to that year, you mentioned your father graduating in 76, you said?
Yeah.
My parents were, I think, 74 and 77.
Okay.
So this is also a year that and we'll get into it in a minute. Here are some of these albums that I'm going to say. There was definitely an influence. There's definitely I don't want to say indoctrination, but the way that we play certain records in the car or in the house for our kids might become the bedrock of a foundation for what they find to be interesting when they're of age, if you will.
Absolutely.
So I love this. I love this stuff. It's very personal. Again, this is not a Rolling Stone best of, because we're music connoisseurs in the way that you guys are. This is not an official publication. This is very personal. So, mileage may vary. Before we get into the albums, though, I have to, of course, say that if you are here on YouTube, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if listening old school, Paul, what should they do?
They're going to rate, they're going to review, and they are going to subscribe on their preferred podcast platform of choice. Feed that algorithm the way that 1976 fed those that eventually fed us. So.
Oh man, I thought you were gonna do some Thomas Jefferson shit.
No, I thought about it. You know what I mean? But we've got listeners all over the world, and I want to respect the fact that they could give two flying.
That's right. This is just another year. I'm always reminded of when, because I watch a lot of European soccer, and so I'll watch a game, and World Cup right now, go USA, and there'll be a game like on an American holiday, and like they don't give a damn. It's what's Thanksgiving to them? They don't know. So I just find that interesting. Anyways, before I go on a tangent,
but I'm going to go on a tangent really quickly. Who's that Viking soccer player? Holland. Erling
Haaland.
Oh, good. Yes. That guy is just he is a fun watch. I almost want to root for that team. I'm not Norwegian. I'm not Norwegian, my man. But at the same time, you watch this guy, and he's just bulldozing people, just like taking the flop that is soccer, not slop. I said flop. That is soccer, and picking those red cards up and just gambit style going boom. How do you like that, sucker? Get up, let's play some ball. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the style. That's all I'm going to say.
Erling Haaland is a confident specimen of a footballer, and anybody who is a Manchester City fan knows what I'm talking about. One last thing, a bit of news and notes. If you are a fan of this particular program, there are links below to support the show via Patreon or the merch store. I'm wearing a thing. Paul's wearing a thing. And I've got a thing in my hand here that you could all procure. Yeah, and we appreciate anybody who's bought anything to support the show. So there you go. That's all I got to say for that. So there are no rules here, Paul. It's just we've come together on a year, and then we just pick the albums that speak to us, that soundtrack that year for us. And would you like to go first, or should I go first? Want to flip a pin? We did last time.
Flip a pin, yeah. That's what I did last time. I'll go first.
Okay, so go for
it. First of all, nods to some special records that I've come to appreciate that came out in 1976.
Are you doing honorable mentions first?
Kind of. Like these are records that like I appreciate on such a deep level and enjoy, but they aren't necessarily records that as I was growing up or even through my youth were played on the regular because that's what my parents were into or anything like that. But no one in my family was a David Bowie fan. But Station to Station is a special record on a lot of levels. Bob Dylan brings out Desire, also a great record. Rush's 2112. Just a huge record. Queen's Day at the Races. I can keep going, man. Like you had standout efforts from Elton John, Marvin Gaye. You had James Brown, ABBA. I mean, debuts from Heart. You had Bob Seger debuting with the silver with Bullet Band, I think they were called. You had disco entries from Blondie coming out. You had Bee Gees. I mean, this is just like the who's who.
It's a gauntlet, yeah.
It is, dude. And all of that dropped in 1976. And yet I'm not going to talk about any of those.
I might.
Good. I'm glad you will. There'll be a lot less redundancy. Here's where I want to begin. I want to begin in Kansas. Because we might not be in Kansas anymore, Dorothy, but in 1976, Kansas dropped Leftoverture. And this record I thought was huge, only because on a lot of levels, like you got this band and they had this like Midwest progressive thing going on, which I thought was interesting. When I kind of dove deeper into the band as I got older, but this particular record just like catapulted them into like massive hit makers. And Carry On My Wayward Son, that is a song that, when I was starting to, we had a radio station in San Francisco that played basically just like 70s and 80s. It was like classic rock, right? And mostly 70s though. And this song was just constantly in the rotation and it was infectious. It really, really was. And I cannot hear the song and not associate just like flipping through a dial on the radio and landing on this classic rock station. And that's the song that comes on, and it's like 5.5 minutes long, dude. It was crazy. Like the way to open a record. And even the single version was pared down a little bit. But what's interesting is like, this wasn't even their first record either. It was their fourth, you know what I mean? And it's just like your quintessential like FM radio staple. Always loved this record. Always loved this particular song. I just thought it was, it reminded me a lot of what Radiohead was able to do years later. I know this sounds like a weird connection, but you took a band that was kind of like really progressive. Let me rephrase that. It's the inverse. Like you had a band that was like really accessible on a lot of levels in Radiohead that became very progressive, and they became accessible in new ways. Whereas with Kansas, you had a band that was very progressive that suddenly became far more accessible. And I just thought that journey is such an interesting like case study for a rock band. But Kerry Livgren's, I mean, you want to talk about like time signatures and the hooks, just the instrumentation, the way that Steve Walsh sings. I mean, if you listen to just like Dust in the Wind, I know it's the same record, but you listen to just some of the music that these guys made, man, it's just like, it's flawless, Carry On My Wayward Son. Yeah. I thought as a record and to feature a song that had vocals like that, especially in the 90s, I wasn't used to a vocalist carrying a song like that, vocally speaking. So always appreciated that kind of stuff. And that one, I mean, decades later is definitive for them. And for me, like it's a definitive classic 70s rock album.
Yeah. 100% no argument from me. It's like you said at the top, we are spoiled for choice in this year. So there's going to be albums that I'm just going to not mention because I know we have the time for it. But that's certainly one that jumped out at me when I was kind of doing my Googling of, okay, what are all those albums? Like, oh, shit, that was that year? That was that year? I was like, oh, shit, that was that year. And I'm like, honestly, there are some albums on our list here that I figured Paul's probably going to mention this one. So let me leave it just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case. I'm going to start off maybe with an obvious choice, but I figured I should get it out of the way early. And that is the wonderful and fabulous Stevie Wonder songs in the key of life.
Great choice.
This is, I mean, come on. Only the third album to date to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It was a double LP plus a bonus EP, 15 million plus copies sold. It won Album of the Year at the Grammys, among many other awards. I mean, talk about timeless. Love's in Need of Love Today. Yes, please. I'll take some of that. I mean, talk about the hooks. I Wish, Sir Duke, Pastime Paradise, Isn't She Lovely? These all got my attention. And as I got older, the rest of the album, its themes resonated even deeper. And by the way, I heard Pastime Paradise before Gangster's Paradise. So all of you being like, oh, you just had a Coolio song and you figured it out. No, I did not. I heard this song first. And I think that the idea of an album as a statement, this is so huge to me. It's
a magnum opus, man.
It absolutely is.
Huge record.
I think it's one of the albums that made me fall in love with the album. And I would say I'm not really a singles guy. Like I like the album as a piece of art. And I think it's something that bands of our formative years really nailed as well. And I think we talked about that many times on the show with Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all these other bands. And I know a lot of people found melody and songwriting with the Beatles. But for me, you mentioned your dad. My mom was playing this record, Michael Jackson, Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, Earth, Wind & Fire in the house. I mean, this is what I was exposed to early. And these bands helped me understand groove and melody and songwriting early on. And Stevie might be the best of the bunch when considering how many genres this guy was melding onto
R&B, hip-hop, pop, jazz.
It's all over the map.
All over the place, yeah.
And he nails it all. And the session musicians are tremendous. It's just... I know I'm not breaking news here, but like I can still see the album cover sitting on the vinyl player in my house in 1990 or whatever the hell it was, 1987 or something like that. It's obviously an all-time classic, but it's a special one for me. So
fantastic choice. First of all, it's funny that despite like how immense in scope that thing was, it never really lost like. I shouldn't say it didn't lose. It just that there's an element of like human joy and curiosity in that record. That song, Isn't She Lovely? When our daughter was born, I remember my life. It was enriched by my wife who kept playing that song, and I was like, what is your obsession with this Stevie Wonder song? She was like, well, listen to the beginning. You hear that baby crying, and it was like an ode to his daughter. Those are the tears of his daughter captured and recorded as an infant. I'm sure when he goes back and if he goes back and re-listens to that. Just the first 10, 15 seconds alone are worth it for him. Yeah. But it just got me so jazzed up for us having a little girl and making those connections through music as well. So yeah, brilliant. Great, fantastic choice.
All right, album number 2.
Okay, album number 2. I'm in high school and I'm driving down. I'm driving along the coast in San Francisco, and the windows are down. And my buddies and we had just watched this, in the 90s, there was this all about the 70s and the 90s, right? So you had all these movies like Dazed and Confused and whatnot, these like callbacks to the 70s, right? Well, one of those movies was it was more on the B movie side. It wasn't at the Dazed and Confused level. So it was a film called The Stoned Age. And it is a hilarious film. I highly recommend that if you haven't seen it, that you go check it out. Great comedy from the 90s. And in the movie, there's this obsession about Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. And I had never heard that song before, believe it or not, before seeing that movie. For whatever reason, like it just, my dad never played it. Whenever I happened to be flipping through these, classic rock FM channels, it never just happened to pop up for whatever reason. And I finally hear this song for the first time. And in my head, I'm thinking, this song is epic. I just couldn't believe how good this song was. And the movie just kind of like deepened it. That became like an anthem for me in high school with my group of friends, which sounds strange. You know what I mean? That, well over a decade later, I'm graduating high school. And then here's this song from 1976. That's like kind of like the theme of the year, but that's what it was, man. It really, really was. And it comes off of Agents of Fortune, which is the record Blue Oyster Cult released at the time. And when I obviously the song was a gateway for me to say, well, what else is on this record? So I'm going back and I'm listening to like, ETI and This Ain't the Summer of Love. And there's just great stuff on. It was really intelligent songwriting too, because at the same time that like I was trying to study this record, like there's like Butthole Surfers coming on, like, as soon as I take the CD out and that's what comes out on the radio. So, I mean, when you just think about like the rich production and these like killer hooks and the guitar work, and that solo, dude, that solo in Don't Fear the Reaper is just haunting. And it's just, it's trippy. It really, really is. So I don't want to reduce this record to a single song, because I think that it overlooks just how much the record actually has to offer. And I mentioned a couple of songs already, but just like let this thing play through, because I think that if you haven't heard this album, you're gonna hear a level of storytelling and the way that hard rock and progressive rock can kind of flourish together in a way that does not feel disjointed. And I think they were kind of like the masters of that. They were, again, they're just master storytellers in the way that they wrote too. And Don't Fear the Reaper is just a beautiful story when you listen to the lyrics too. So anyway, going with Agents of Fortune, Blue Oyster Cult here.
Great shout. Definitely on the long list before I had to start paring things down. It's a hell of a song. It's a hell of a record. I like it. We're 4 for 4 as far as I'm scoring at home.
All right. So there we go.
Or I guess 3 for 3. About to be a 4 for 4 because there's no way you can't love Boston's debut.
Oh,
Boston.
God. Killer choice.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong? No, I'm not. Absolutely not. This record, dude, it sold almost 25 million records worldwide, 17 million alone in the US. It stayed on the Billboard 200 for 132 weeks. That is over 2.5 years. And I mentioned earlier about my mom's influence with, Stevie Wonder. Well, this is my dad. My dad is the one that guided me towards Boston, probably in the car or maybe even with a cassette tape at home. And I remember as a teenager learning or trying to learn Boston's guitar work on the debut because I thought it was both accessible but also challenging in a way. And Tom Scholz's production, and people have gone on about this for years.
Wow, all the layered guitar harmonies. It's just like
so. And then he built his own studio, and he was like doing it all himself, like DIY style. And I think it offered a clear direction. Yet, I also was wondering, as you mentioned, what's happening in all those layers, right? What is going on? How many guitars are here? And I mentioned songwriting earlier, and if there was ever an album to lean into hooks and melody and lyricism built for the mainstream America, I mean, this is it, right? This was something that I could easily understand, but was unsuspectingly complex at the same time. I mean, just listen to or try to learn the bass line for 4 play long time. It is crazy hard. I think I figured that out trying to play remember Rock Band, the video game Rock Band?
Yeah.
4 Play a Long Time was one of those tracks, and you could like
do it
as bass. And
I'm surprised More Than a Feeling or Peace of Mind wasn't on there instead. 4 Play a Long Time is a great song off that record, but what an interesting choice.
think it's because the musicianship is just so crazy.
Yeah,
they're like, this would be a challenge.
And
so I'm someone who's of many, sometimes contradictory minds when it comes to music. I appreciate the hell out of this kind of detailed musicianship and this crisp, clean, meticulous approach to the record, which is actually opposite to another record coming up that I'm going to say. But this is why music is so great, because Boston just has 8 hits in a row, beautifully produced, and yet there's other records that sound nothing like it and are as awesome to me. So Boston's debut.
It's just, I mean, the masterclass in melodic rock on so many levels. My dad in the garage, he had rock posters, a bunch of Maiden posters, a metal poster, a ton of rock posters. That Boston debut is that album cover is one of those posters. I'll never forget seeing that. Just iconic. We were on the State of America podcast a couple of years ago, and I remember having a conversation with you and them about just great debuts. And I was on record as saying that it's arguably, that and Montrose's debut, like one of the greatest debut albums, period, of any musical artist or band. It just hit after hit after hit. I mean, there's not a bad song on the record, so great choice.
All right, we've got your third choice coming up, Paul.
Oh God, where to go from here? I'm going to go off the beaten path. I'm going to go off the beaten path because I get derided, ridiculed, mocked for this on the regular. I am a
Barbra Streisand.
No, I am a huge fan of Led Zeppelin's Presence.
Oh yeah,
I think that when you think about this band's catalog, when you think about the conditions under which this record was created, where you have Robert Plant in just a terrible, terrible accident, and he's basically relegated to a chair. I mean, the guy is, recording the whole record without really getting up. And Jimmy meets him, and it basically the two of them just put this thing together. And for those conditions and under that strife, for them to put songs together that are like an epic rock opera, like Achilles' Last Stand, which to me is up there with Tom Sawyer and some of these other, huge rock songs. But also like, Nobody's Fault But Mine. It's just scintillating the way it vacillates back and forth. I'm also a huge fan of the entire record, man. I mean, there's just like T for One is also just a fantastic track.
Royal Orleans.
I mean, there's so much diversity on arguably their shortest record. And, it's just, there's a looseness to it. There's a spontaneity to it, which you had to have. Cause I almost think Jimmy was trying to like cajole something out of, trying to evoke Plant from this stool or this chair that he was sitting in after this car wreck. And I think that it's so vastly overshadowed by all of their earlier records. And I think the conditions forced a level of focus and physical resilience that simply does not exist on any other record in the catalog. And so for that reason alone, I think it's a monumental triumph of a record. And when I started like going through Led Zeppelin's records, and I was just, really like diving in and, trying to get beyond just, Led Zeppelin 4, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This was the record that I remember when I learned more about it, and I learned what they went through to record it. It was like I was discovering the record for the first time all over again. And I think that it's just the power of like the recording process. Like, so I think, we talked about Dark Matter. We've spoken a lot with artists about their process. Every time we have a guest on, we speak at length about not just the songs and what they mean, but more importantly, like the humanity behind that. You know what I mean? Like what is it that we can unearth that helps us better understand how that record informs our human experience, and the recording of that record is the journey by which we can do that. So Presence is probably the first record in my relationship with music where I developed a newfound appreciation for the record and a greater understanding of music. And I found that a record actually was elevated for me because of my deeper understanding of how the record was was assembled, how it was put together. So for me, it's like a signature moment in my relationship with music, this particular record here. So just a big fan of it.
Yeah, it's a great choice. I mean, the fact that, you said Plant was relegated to a wheelchair. I mean, he didn't really want to be there because it was like a weird like basement studio in Munich, and they were like up against it time wise as the Rolling Stones were about to do Black and Blue, and then like Jimmy Page had to like borrow a couple of days to do it, to finish like doing 18-hour days, and like it's the first record since I can't remember what it was. The first record did not have keyboards, and it didn't have any acoustic guitars on it. It was just straight up.
It's their version of prog, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's wild is I had known of Achilles' Last Stand. I think early on in high school, a buddy of mine pointed it out, and I never even realized where it was from until years later. And I go, "Oh yeah, that's in this record. Okay, cool. Let me listen to the rest of it. Oh shit!" And you go, "Wait, I know that song. I know that one too. That's interesting." You start putting the pieces together, and so when I deep dove, I was like, "Oh wow, to put this together under the circumstances is pretty amazing." But the fact that it gets overshadowed by the previous 6 records is also kind of amazing in a weird way.
Says a lot about Led Zeppelin.
It sure does. It sure does. All right. My next choice is another, I don't want to say it's obvious, but it's seminal. And that is the very first and self-titled Ramones record.
Solid choice.
Ramones. Yeah. This one is, recorded in a week for about $6,400. I love that punk attitude. And the thing is that this record didn't do a goddamn thing when it first came out. It peaked at 111 on the Billboard 200, sold only 6,000 copies in its first year. But, how Time has treated this masterpiece well. It's ranked number 1 on a litany of greatest punk albums of all time, including Rolling Stones. It also is the Rolling Stones' greatest debut album of all time. You mentioned Boston. Well, this is Rolling Stone's favorite, is the Ramones debut. And I think there's something our favorite band knows a little something about having a great debut with Ken. So I think for some reason we love debut albums that kick ass. I don't know what it is. But I mentioned the fact that this album is the antithesis in many ways to the previous album I just mentioned, Boston. And that is why I love it. It is raw.
Blitzkrieg, it is simple. Man.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's so many songs on this thing, but like it proves that you can write a great song with three chords, and attitude and heart. And for me, I think punk is the true gateway to rock and roll music at large. I mean, how often do you hear from successful musicians, at least on our show too, about how they grew up on punk? That was one of their first loves, be it Jeff Ament or Kim Thayil or James Joseph. And I have loved learning about this record in my formative years because it showed me that, theirs was an easier entry point to making noise, to blowing off some steam, and just grooving out all at the same time. You might love something like Boston, but it's hard to replicate that. It might feel intimidating, right? But the Ramones and punk, like, that's an easier entry point. For me, it was actually, Green Day and The Offspring that first brought punk to mind, because that's how old I am, and that was on the radio at the time. But even a cursory glance behind those curtains, and you find that it's the Ramones, it's the Clash, and there are so many incredible timeless tracks. You mentioned Blitzkrieg Bop, but I'm going to mention 53rd and 3rd. Now I Want to Sniff Some Glue. I Want to Be Your Boyfriend. Today Your Love, Tomorrow the World. I mean, this record is littered with classics. And I think on some level, knowing that it took a long time for the greater music scene to recognize that is something that I think I cherish personally, because I think as a teenager, it's easy to feel like you're not being noticed. And punk, I think, leans into that and helps us feel seen when it feels like no one else is doing it. Yeah. So from a thematic point, but also a musicology standpoint, it's so accessible. And I think it's why kids just love it so much. And I do.
Yeah, you'll get no qualms with me on that one. That is an absolute classic, man. For me, that album was kind of like the gateway into being more open to exploring, back catalogs from, Green Day and The Offspring, Rancid, Bad Religion. I mean, those are bands that obviously, they were smashing when we were younger, but it was the desire to know, like, okay, where did this start though? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which is great stuff, dude. Love that record. Fantastic choice. I'm going to pivot. I think you're going to like this story. So when I was in high school, living in San Francisco, we used to drive up to Lake Tahoe a lot. I had a friend of mine who had a family home up there. And we spent a whole summer after high school up there working and living for the summer. Great summer. And the friend of mine that I had at the time that we would drive up and back and forth to Tahoe, he did not like Pearl Jam. Just could not stand Pearl Jam. Like, who does like? So that was always a funny like point of contention.
And we dropped him off in Sacramento.
Yeah. So he was driving the car. So obviously, at one point, I said, okay, fine. You don't like Pearl Jam. You play what you want to play them. He puts on Tom Petty. All right, I can get behind this. Right, sure.
Yeah.
So he's probably the biggest Tom Petty fan that I ever knew. And what's funny about that was I knew Tom Petty. I had like Wildflowers and the Greatest Hits record and whatnot. But eventually I was like, I kind of want to like just go listen to all of Tom Petty's records. And so eventually, while we were in Tahoe, I went to a used record store and there was a CD of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and the debut from 1976. And I'm listening to this and it's like underground Bruce Springsteen. You know what I mean? It was just American Girl and Breakdown. And I mean, this was like the beginning, you know what I mean? This is kind of like where it started. And it was cool as you get like those jangling guitars that are just hallmarks of early Petty's music, but you're also getting like it felt like a seasoned band, man. Like it wasn't like, like Seeger, for example, with Silver Bullet Band. I mean, that was an evolution. I mean, these guys debut, boom, Heartbreakers, let's rock and roll. And it was like, there is grit. There was a polish to it at the same time. And Petty was confident, dude. Even the little smirk he's got on his face with the album cover. I mean, you could just see like Heartland Rock was born in this moment. And like, there was nobody else that was going to birth that movement, but this guy. And, I mean, in hindsight, man, I mean, it's just something like, it's arguably one of the greatest rock careers in history. So Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, debut 1976. Cannot go wrong with that one.
No, it's an enjoyable listen from front to back. And obviously it's the backbone to a career that spawned countless classics, but that blues, Southern bass, but like sense of like a pop sensibility and the laid back swagger, if that makes sense, back swagger of Tom's voice. That's the jumping off point. It's a great show. Where should I go next? Let's see here. What do I have? You know what? We'll go with this one. We're going to go with Aerosmith Rocks.
Oh, good choice.
Love this one. I mentioned Aerosmith earlier as an early influence from my mom, and this is probably the key culprit. This and Toys in the Attic, but Rocks. It was a big time hit. It peaked at 3 in the Billboard Top 200. It was their highest to date at the time. And it has since sold more than 4 million units, according to my notes here. But the reason why I love Rocks is because it showed me that rock can be dangerous. Okay. Funnily enough, even though Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction came out like while I was alive and not too far from when I started like finding music on my own, it was Rocks that was on rotation consistently in my house when I was, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever it was. I didn't know it at the time, but Aerosmith were high as all get out during the making of this bad boy. Really high. And I mean, Joe Perry wrote Back in the Saddle, clocked out of his mind in heroin and wrote that riff on a 6-string bass because fuck it, why not? Why not a 6-string bass? Just like back in the saddle. Every track sounds alive and full of piss and vinegar. It sounds like they're playing in the room together. It's unapologetic in its aversion to musical safety. This is something a preteen can really sink his teeth into. I mentioned Ramones. That is accessible for that reason. This is accessible for this reason, right? It's attractive. And again, despite the success of its singles, Last Child, Home Tonight, and the aforementioned Back in the Saddle, I think its success is truly album based. These guys, like most of my favorite bands, they built a reputation through their live show. And after a handful of years together, that chemistry was expertly replicated in the studio on Rocks. And I think you can hear it. And I need to also mention that Aerosmith was probably the first band to show me why having two guitarists in a band is a really fucking good idea. And this is probably the record that to do it first. And it's something that I'd obviously come to love about Metallica and Pearl Jam, but it all started with Bradley Whitford and Joe Perry on Rocks, thanks to Mom. So there you go.
I cannot argue with that, my man. By the way, I think you know where I'm going here.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many to choose from.
There are, but I've spoken about this record a few times already, and you got to see this man play Black with Pearl Jam.
Oh, yes, I knew you were going to go here.
I did not get to see, and
yes.
You and Sheehan actually were there for that show, if I recall, and what an epic moment that was. Peter Frampton Comes Alive is arguably the greatest live album ever released. And, this at the time, like when you think about like live music, I mean, today, it's very much in the lexicon of what a record is. But back then, like it was not commonplace for bands to release live versions of, the Beatles were doing it, but it's like they were mostly viewed as like, we got to buy some time here before we release another. And I just think about Peter Frampton at this point in his career. He had released, I think it was 3 or 4 records that were middling. They were not commercially successful at all. And you can only release so many records before a label's like, I don't know, So he was kind of at an interesting.
Looking at you, Kiss.
Well, I'm saying he was at a place in his career, man, where it was like, I don't know how many more he's going to get. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you take songs from those first 4 albums, and he's got the talk box, and he goes out there on stage, and a lot of it was recorded in San Francisco, the Winterland Ballroom, and it's just like it's electric, dude. It's like when you think about live performances that are just central to rock culture, this is it. Like he's got this like super approachable, warm stage presence, which you saw in person, and you can attest to that, obviously. But the extended guitar interplay also present in his, solo on Black, which Mike rightfully deferred to him for it. But it's just this super cool moment where it's just like you get these songs and they have new vitality now, and people are starting to see, oh man, like that those songs were really, really good. But the studio versions could not match that. Yeah. And it's so fascinating. Like when you take a band like Pearl Jam, we talked about how they made records earlier in their career to give them a reason to go play live. There's something about, and the Beatles did this all the time. Until Rubber Soul, it was all about, we're going to make songs to play live. And then that shift happened. And we're like, well, we're never going to play live again. So we're going to bring every instrument under the sun into the studio because we know we don't have to drag it all over the world with us. But it's the kind of record, I think, that when you think about like how a record can transform an artist's career, you do not think a live album of partially previously released material that was commercially unsuccessful already could possibly do that. But like, Show Me the Way, Baby I Love Your Way, Do You Feel Like We Do? Like there are so many songs on this record that I just think are just absolutely fantastic. Just the album cover too was just iconic. You know what I mean? It was one of those, I think there was like a review. I think Rolling Stone.
It's a thick head of hair, Paul. It's a thick head of hair.
Yeah, it is. But at the time, like it was. I'm going to find this quote here if I can. But it was album of the year in 1976, according to Rolling Stone readers. And in the review, they talked about how it was the type of record that like every girl fell in love with and wanted to have his picture in their locker. And it was also the type of record where all their older brothers loved it too.
Oh, like, yeah.
That was the level of accessibility that we were talking about here. And I think that's a special record when you do that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's a special record. So I've always just come to appreciate the story of the record, you know what I mean? But also just the innovation and the sheer artistry of what he was able to do when he got on stage, and how you could like literally just become a brand new enigma for a listener simply by just getting out of the studio and stepping on the stage. And so so go Frampton Comes Alive. It's a must have.
If you have an amazing live show and you're able to capture it on tape at the time, what better way to promote the fact that you are worth seeing and worth investing in than doing that? And
it's the best-selling record of. We're talking about 1976. This was the best-selling record that year.
It's crazy,
nuts.
But it makes a lot of sense at the same time.
Yeah,
it's a great choice. Great choice. I'm going to go to a record in a gentleman that you've already named.
Oh, are we doing Bowie?
No, I'm actually not the biggest fan of Bowie. Which I know is sacrilegious, but he just doesn't do a whole lot for me. You can send your hate mail to Paul Ghiglieri, care of State of Trust Podcast. No, I'm going to go with Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. Yes, Night Moves is the album. Now, when I think about albums that I discovered after I discovered contemporary records, this is one of my favorites. Night Moves is one of those records that I found probably later into my adulthood, probably like mid-20s, I want to say. I knew the hits. I knew the name Bob Seger, but those Chevy commercials were huge in the 90s. Come on, right? Like a rock. But I didn't realize how much I would love this record until later in life. And it's something that I felt almost a little embarrassed by, that I didn't know more about it, didn't recognize how good it was. And I think for me, it's because it's got this Rod Stewart meets Bruce Springsteen meets like Rolling Stones sort of thing going on. And for me, he's taking the parts I like best about those artists and putting them together in a perfectly blended agua fresca, if I may, strained through a fine mesh Bob Seger sieve. That's what this is for me. Okay. And all of this comes to a head with the title track, Night Moves. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. And I will say that that's a very long list, but it's on the list. And I would say the groove, the bouncy bass line carrying the melody, the piano like tickling the edges of the melody, and the guitars, like they're the acoustic guitars are the bedrock of this thing. And then the backing vocals come in. I mean, it all comes together in just the right way. And I would say kudos to Jim Brazise, who mixed the record so perfectly. It's got this clean, everything has its own space and frequency thing going on. But while it also feels organic at the same time, few songs and few albums feel more American to me, if that makes any sense. Like,
for sure,
it's the kind of Americana that kind of transcends divides that are obviously rampant and pronounced these days. But just listen to Night Moves and how it returns for its final chorus out of the bridge. There's like this build up. It's religious in a lot of ways, the way that comes back in. I think of Pentecostal choirs, how they kind of get down low and they come back up, that kind of thing. All these superlatives are how I would describe my favorite songs, including my favorite Pearl Jam songs. This is what good songs do. And this is Bob Seger. He's unapologetic. He's real. He's authentic. He's honest with a hell of a backing band. And it showed me how to be honest in music and sound great at the same time. Bob Seger, Night Moves.
Solid choice.
Where are you going now, my friend?
Let's see. I got one or two more left in me here. At the time, if you had asked me what's your dad's favorite band, I probably would have said Kiss. And you mentioned Kiss. Well, Alive came out in 75, and it's amazing to me how a year later they can drop Destroyer. And to me, this record was interesting to me because I saw them as, when I was younger as a kid, it's just like this larger than life spectacle. You know what I mean? They were just this live spectacle, not the spectacle in the way Peter Frampton's Live Comes Alive was a spectacle. And that was different, the kind of spectacle. Kiss was a very different kind of spectacle. And as my dad would play Kiss all the time in the house, like just blasting it. I mean, the walls were shaking, dude. It was bananas. But they dropped this record, and what was so fascinating to me was when I tried to discover Kiss on my own years later. You know what I mean? I started looking into this particular record here to better understand them. I felt like this was kind of like this was the pivot. Like they had like 3 records before that were a little rough around the edges, but they were great for obvious reasons. And they helped, they blew up with it. But like this to me was the moment where they just became more than that, if you will. And what's interesting is like this Detroit Rock City is a great song. I mean, isn't there a movie by that title about kids going to see a Kiss show?
Yes,
So
yes.
that's
Like
how
20 years
big
ago.
this record is, right?
Yeah.
Right? It literally spawned a film about kids wanting to go see them play this song. Shout it out loud, great song. But it's Beth. That's the one.
Peter Criss. Shout out Peter Criss.
Dude, like he's the drummer, dude. And like he co-writes the string assisted ballad, and it's beautiful and it's great. And I just think it showed that they were so much more than, the rough rockers that we saw on their first 3 albums. And there's obviously enduring studio classics. We just referenced a couple of them, but I think for me, this was the record that showed me the type of band that Kiss could be. And when I think of, Guns N' Roses playing a song like November Rain, I can't help but think what Beth was, right? What Beth was to Destroyer in 1976, and how it kind of laid, in a lot of ways, a foundation for how a bombastic rock band who is larger than life could still produce something like this. Anyway, so Destroyer from Kiss, I think, is just it's hard to talk 1976 without this record.
I'm glad you did. And shout out to Bob Ezrin, the producer, for getting their ducks in a row, because that band didn't really know musical theory and just kind of rock their asses off, which works to a point. And he got them to understand their craft and put together some amazing music on that record and beyond. So
it's a great story, dude. The whole you're noticing a theme here that the albums that you and I seem to be drawn to are these albums where the genesis of them are just great human stories about resilience and growth mindsets and reinventing yourself and rediscovering yourself. I don't know, man. It's a big year in music.
I'm going to keep it going with AC/DC High Voltage, my friend. Oh, yeah. You know what? I'm going to call it their debut. I know technically it was like the 3rd if you count the Australia ones.
Yeah.
But we're going to call this the debut. So unless you're in Australia, this was the first thing you heard. God damn it. So High Voltage, again, I stress I was not alive in 1976, but High Voltage is one of those records that you may not realize you love half the album because your friend's, older brother or your uncle or someone played it all the time, and the song's just stuck in your head like earworms until much later in life. And you go, oh shit, those were all in High Voltage? Those were all AC/DC? Yes, they were. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Rock and Roll Singer, The Jack, Livewire, TNT. That's only side A, Paul. And I'm not going to lie, I had to stop writing my notes for this one because, like my process for my process for these soundtracking shows is to kind of blast the record through these speakers behind me and then jot down kind of stream of consciousness notes. And I had to stop and play air guitar along with this one. And I mentioned how Aerosmith's Rocks, taught me how to appreciate dangerous rock and roll. AC/DC's High Voltage helped me understand how to have fun. Okay? There is a sultry, dirty nature to High Voltage that I think, thankfully, they were able to retain for a long time, that eventually, as often happens, gets rounded off a bit when the major labels come calling. And no disrespect to for those about to rock or Back in Black, both excellent albums, of course, but there's something organic about High Voltage. It's rock without a seatbelt, but with a really good driver. And I also got to mention, one of the superpowers of High Voltage is also one of its most common criticisms. It's simple.
It is simple.
It's simple.
It is.
Keep it simple, stupid Kiss, right? But while that's not entirely true, because listen, not everyone has an Angus Young, it's also one of the reasons why I and so many others fell in love with punk, right? I mentioned that before, the Ramones. This music sounds accessible, but it's also elevated. And I think that is the mark of a brilliant record, and High Voltage accomplishes that in spades. And like I said, it doesn't hurt to have Angus Young or Bon Scott or Malcolm Young. Okay, you get it. But High Voltage, AC/DC has to be on the list.
Cannot argue with that, my man.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you got?
You want to do one more?
I mean, I could do a couple more. You tell me.
We could do one or two more.
Okay.
Let's do one or two more. All right. So There's a song from the 1970s that I don't think you'll ever meet somebody that either A, doesn't know the lyrics to, or B, doesn't like. And that song is Hotel California.
Oh my God, you're taking my thunder here, guy. All right, let's have this one. Go ahead.
Okay, but my reasoning for it might be a little different than yours. So this song to me has always had a special place in my heart for a variety of reasons, most closely associated with girls I had been dating at the time. But what's interesting to me, though, is I did not like the Eagles before finding this record. Like, if you play me early Eagles stuff, like a lot of it didn't really like resonate with me on a lot of levels at the time. There was just a country quality to their music early on that just didn't resonate with me. And there was also it was depressing, dude. Like, it was like there was pessimism and, it was desolate and just trudging through the 70s. And this record comes out, and I feel like bringing on Joe Walsh just was a game changer. It was just,
oh my God,
just a game changer, because Life in the Fast Lane crushes. Hotel California is a classic. New Kid in Town just kicks. So I'm listening to this record, and I'm like, this isn't the Eagles. It's like, yes, it is. So it's one of those things where, as I started to understand how they could make this jump from like that level of country to more like straight ahead rock on an album, at the time, obviously, it opened them up to like a huge swath of people, like just brand new audience on a lot of levels, and they didn't have to sacrifice like the lyricism, you know what I mean, that made so much of what Don Henley does great. But I think what was special about this record was the way that Joe Walsh was able to play guitar and added that like harder, heavier edge to it. We're not talking like metal here, you know what I mean? But the meticulous songwriting and like the vocal harmonies that they were known for, this just complemented it. So it was like the missing ingredient for me that just wasn't present before. So yes, it's a very polished production. I get that. It's very deeply reflective, and it's haunting, and it's got all this cryptic stuff going on there. And it's about excess and disillusionment, and this is the cost of success in 1970s, corporate America. I hear all that, and I think it's great, and I think it's heady, and I think it's prescient, and I think a lot of those lessons are still just as relevant today as they were back then. That being said, there's atmosphere on this record, and it is timeless. So for me, like Hotel California is just, it's one of those, if somebody said, you can't beat that record for me, I'm not going to try to fight you on it. It's not my number one record, but I'm not going to fight you on it either. So.
Oh, well, Paul, 30 million copies sold. One of the highest grossing records
before Michael Jackson's Thriller. It was, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it speaks volumes. So,
it was in my list, but I've got others to choose from. So I'm just going to read you something that spoke to me about this record that I don't think a lot of people really go this far down with it. But Don Henley said a few things about this record at the time. He goes, the themes are the same. I'm sorry, the album's themes are the same themes that run through all of our work. Loss of innocence, the cost of naivete, the perils of fame, of excess, exploration of the dark underbelly of the American dream, idealism realized and idealism thwarted, illusion versus reality, the difficulties of balancing loving relationships and work, trying to square the conflicting relationship between business and art, the corruption in politics, the fading away of the 60s, dream of peace, love, and understanding. And he went on to say, and I think this is the point of this episode.
I believe the word I used was the word I used was heady. I think it was one of them.
Yeah. He continues, the U.S. is 200 years old. Remember, 1976. Mm-hmm. So we figured, since we are the Eagles and the Eagles are national symbol, that we are obliged to make some kind of little bicentennial statement using California as a microcosm of the whole United States, or the whole world, if you will, and to try to wake people up and say, we've been okay so far for 200 years, but we're going to have to change if we're going to continue to be around.
Well, Don, can I introduce you to another Don?
Here's the thing. But to your point, Glenn Frey and Joe Walsh together is amazing.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous.
I had to mention that quote from Don Henley.
It's an outstanding pull right there. Like, that's like, when I think about all the times we've done this show, like, that's one of the best. Like, I'm just going to pull this nugget and share it. And it's so timely. It's fantastic. Love it.
Okay. I'm going to do, which one should I do next?
I'll do one more after this, because you're right. We'll be here. We'll be here.
I'll do one here, and then we'll do a lot of last ones. Okay. I'll be quick. All right. My next one's going to be Thin Lizzy, Jailbreak.
Sweet. Also on my list.
Awesome. As many of you know out there, I am a huge Metallica fan. And if you are too a big Metallica fan, you know how much those guys, James Hetfield specifically, loves Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy. They were so incredibly good at melding vocal melodies and accessible grooves with intricate dual guitar. I mentioned the dual guitar before, the dual guitar work on this record specifically. It is really incredible to think that when pressed by their label, Lynott said, okay, here you go. Here's Jailbreak, the masterpiece. And by the way, I must say the production quality for 1976 is pretty damn good. I think there is this wonderful intersection of genres. I mentioned Stevie Wonder before. This doesn't go that far, but it's a sound that can only be Thin Lizzy, right? There's blues, there's metal, there's pop, avant-garde in some ways. And everyone knows the hits. Everyone knows Jailbreak. Everyone knows the boys are back in town. In fact, I wonder how many people know the latter and actually ever bother to learn who that band is. Well, it's Thin Lizzy. So go add it to your queue on Spotify or Apple or whatever. It's one of those songs that will be played on classic rock radio stations and in between innings of baseball games or in a truck commercial forever, right? You're going to hear this song forever. And I mentioned the dual guitar work a moment ago, but this is the track where it's truly under the spotlight on the record. The guitar interplay is, like I said, one of the big reasons why I loved Aerosmith and Metallica and Pearl Jam. And I think Thin Lizzy is one of those bands that forms the bedrock of guitar-driven rock music. And this album is timeless for me. It's a lost treasure in many ways because it sits in the shadow of The Boys Are Back in Town. But the whole album is so friggin' good. And I wish Phil Lynott didn't die so early because we could have had more of this stuff. So Phil Lynott, Thin Lizzy, Jailbreak.
Man, that's a solid choice, dude.
What's your last one? We're up against it here.
Okay. In my garage as a kid, I talked about all these posters. There's one poster that's like it's an indelible image in my head, and it didn't come out until 1982.
Bo Derek.
No, but it was a record from a band, and I remember just looking at this picture, and I'm like, this is like it's the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I wanted to hear them, and my dad was like a huge fan of this band, and it took me a while to like really open myself up to like want to hear this type of rock music that he was listening to, because it didn't sound like Boston and it didn't sound like Kiss. That poster on the wall was Screaming for Vengeance from Judas Priest.
Yes,
and it's that metallic Iron Eagle just like zipping through like a blood red sun. It's an epic album cover. And so obviously we're not talking about 1982, we're talking about 1976, but Judas Priest had an album come out in 1976. And for me, if you cannot like heavy metal and not listen to this record from Judas Priest, because Sad Wings of Destiny to me is like a prerequisite to understanding like the history of heavy metal on so many levels. And I think that, I was too young to understand all this and talk to my dad about it at the time and whatnot. But, as I've gone on the journey that I've gone on in my relationship with music, I've been able to kind of like take these little walkabouts, if you will, with these songs and with these records and kind of like try to understand like what this music meant to somebody in 1976, like in the case of my dad, for example. So you got a band, and I think that they're really coming into their own, I think, at this point in time. You talked about the dual guitars. You get the twin guitar attack with Sad Wings of Destiny. You get Rob Halford's operatic vocals, which he was like, he's
so good.
He's like the heavy metal version of Freddie Mercury, dude. Like he's just
yeah.
And there you get the dark themes and the leather and all that kind of stuff. And but it was like modern heavy metal before that genre had ever like, I don't know, like crystallized and like became like grounded, I guess.
That was new wave of British heavy metal, right?
Yeah,
that's part of that thing, right?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, when you think of like Rob's like vocal range, dude, it's astonishing, like how wide that is, man. And it's like but then you like Glenn Tipton, and you've got Kiki Downing, and it's just like the guitar playing. It's just like the partnership I thought was just legendary on this record, because you're listening to ways that they play off each other and complement each other. And you don't hear that on records all the time. I mean, sometimes there's one guy that just steals the show or whatnot. And so I think that for me, the aggression that is heavy metal blended with the sophistication that is what Judas Priest was able to replicate, that to me is what made this particular record really important to 1976, and my own personal relationship with the band, and it Judas Priest and Kiss are bands that I cannot even think of without thinking of my father. So I mean, like Victim of Changes, The Ripper, Dreamer, Deceiver, these songs are the kinds of things that I would be listening to, not because I went out and sought them, but because I'm like doing my homework in the walls. I'm just like, it's just, so,
you can't avoid it. Yeah,
I can't. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the subtext, like when when your
6
wife
times 7 is son of a bitch, Halford.
But I mean, it's like, when you're a baby, or we did this with my youngest. We would put headphones on my wife's belly, and I was playing, pumping Pearl Jam, as one does. And sometimes I'm sure my parents didn't do that with me, with metal and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have to, because as soon as I was capable of hearing in the real world without having my eardrums blown out, my dad was very keen on testing the decibel level to get just right below that. And this was one of those records. So anyway, Judas Priest, I think 1976, man, Sad Wings of Destiny. It's a good one. It's not the album cover that defines them as a band for me, that like made me curious about like, who are these guys when I was like 7 or whatever. But it is obviously the record that I think, to me, on so many levels, like just like kickstarted heavy metal in a lot of ways.
No, excellent choice. I love it. I'm going to bring things a little down, a little smoother. We're going to land a little smoothly here with the last record, and that is Billy Joel, Turnstiles.
Yes, solid choice, man.
We are going to do that. I have had a soft spot in my heart for Billy Joel since I was young.
Might be my wife's favorite artist.
Really?
Yeah, okay. For her birthday, I took her to, or at the time it was AT&T Park, it's now Oracle Park, where the San Francisco Giants play. That was my first and only time seeing Billy Joel live. I mean, and it's like that guy has a catalog of hits. If you haven't seen the documentary, it's
so good.
Really, so good.
It's so good. I think it was. I don't think I had realized at the time, at being so young, how deep. How
did you not have a New York state of mind, Jason? Being from these.
Paul, I was a young, innocent, and ignorant young man who, listen, I was 11, and I just knew that he was the guy that did "We Didn't Start the Fire in River of Dreams." That's what's my entry point.
That was mine.
That's where I came from. I'm always reminded of what is it, Step Brothers? Only 80s Joel, sir. So listen, while both of those songs are tremendous, I will fight to you until the death about those two songs.
I'm with you.
The true heart of Billy's music came out years before, and so when I was older and decided to dive deeper into the catalog, and you mentioned the 5-part docuseries, that really helped solidify these thoughts. And it only came out like a year ago, but it helped me to really, really appreciate the songs I already knew that I liked, but it made me go back even further in like, what are the album cuts, right? And I think the story really helped me to focus in on that. This guy, again, not breaking any news, very talented, Paul, this Billy Joel character. William Joel, quite good. And he just couldn't put together a complete album, though, that the critics or the mainstream public much cared about. But just like the Ramones, folks realized how much gold was there that they'd overlooked years later. And I think Turnstiles is an incredible album, but that was easy for me to see as someone looking back on Billy's career, knowing that he's an absolute G, right? Like I wasn't there in 1976 being like, the hell is this? But when I learned about the recording process for this one, where, he's recording it with some studio session guys in Colorado, and he's like, nope, we're scrapping the whole thing. I'm taking my touring band. We're going to go to New York. We're going to do it right. Like, it all kind of snapped into place. And I think it's pretty obvious when you listen. It is so locked in, and it shows how significant translating, I mentioned it before, translating it translating that live experience, a performer that's so good like he is, into the studio, how key that is for an album success. And you mentioned New York State of Mind. You got James, Angry Young Man, Miami 2017, Say Goodbye to Hollywood. No one batted an eye in 1976 at these, but I didn't know that in the late 90s, 2000s. I just knew I loved those songs and marveled at the execution and the songwriting architecture of Billy Joel. And New York State of Mind, it will get a lot of publicity, but I think if you listen to Miami 2017, that is just an absolute pillar of classic rock. It's everything that makes Billy Joel, for me, a legend. Brilliant song structure, dynamics, the vocals, the storytelling, the piano work, mixed with the backing band. That's everything. Songs like Piano Man and New York State of Mind, they really show off, the songwriting, but like his ability to interplay his great piano work with his vocals. This is everything. This is the whole kit and caboodle. So I think say what you will about Billy Joel, but he's a genius. You might think he's a little cheesy in some ways, and you know what? Fine. I don't give a shit. Turnstiles is proof that he is a genius, and before the rest of the world realized it was out there doing work, and then The Stranger hits a year later, and everyone goes, "Oh, wait a minute, what's that?"
There it is. That was it.
So Turnstiles is going to wrap it up for me. Wow.
1976.
There it is. You mentioned Presence that was on the list. Let me just, who else did I have? You mentioned Heart, Dreamboat Annie. You mentioned Kiss Destroyer. AC/DC, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, pardon me, came out later in 76, by the way. 2 albums.
Great one.
What else? Warren Zevon, self-titled. What a record that was. What else did I have? Was that it?
We can keep going. I mean, there's 100 records from that that you could mention from just iconic artists.
But there we go. 1976. Curious what you guys at home have on your soundtrack of the year 1976. And I can't believe it's been basically 6 months since we first started the series. We should do it more often because this is fun. This is a fun little time capsule experiment, Paul.
It's fantastic. I think my favorite part about it is just rediscovering a relationship with music and grounding it in years. And again, whether you were alive in 1976 or not, you have a relationship with it, whether you know it or not, because those records and those songs are absolutely and intrinsically and indelibly part of your listening experience and your cultural zeitgeist. I mean, you cannot be alive today and of at least not our age or anywhere close to it and not know at least, a quarter, if not half, if not all of the songs that we just talked about.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll put it out to the internet to decide our next year that we talk about for soundtracking the year. And whatever your albums are.
1906.
I couldn't tell you anything from that year. I'll have to go to the speakeasies of Chicago and St. Louis to find anything worth a damn, I think. Anyway, let us know what your albums are in the comments or wherever you talk to us online. I'd love to find out what you guys think of our choices and whatever moved you from the year 1976. Happy 250th to America. As Don Henley said, we got work to do. But we're here to do it through music, right?
We are indeed.
If you are a fan of the show, a fan of what we're doing here, we got the merch here, we got the Patreon. Links are below to help support the show. We love you for doing so. And what's the next thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, if you're here on YouTube, you can go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if listening only,
you're going to rate, you're going to review, and you're hopefully going to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Feed that algorithm like you're feeding Detroit Rock City, baby. How about that?
Oh, don't forget to shout it out loud, too, when you do that.
You should, yeah.
Yeah. And
that's what Kiss and AC/DC would do. Am I right?
That's true. Right? That's absolutely true. And as you've probably seen, for those of you watching, you've probably seen little lower third bars come up a bunch throughout the entire episode, reminding you to go ahead and follow us on social media, wherever you do the social media, be it the Blue Sky or the Instagram, the Facebook, whatever it is. And we'll continue the conversation over there. Until then, we'll be back with you next week. I think we're talking about one album next week, Paul.
Just one.
That we're going to review it. That came out this week, next week, last week, years ago. We call it a
Very
retro
excited
review.
about that one. Retro review on tap.
Boom. Until then, we'll see you next week. Until we do, you've been listening to or watching
The State of Love and Trust.